This is a classic because it packs so many intricate themes, conversations, and important topics into 29 short pages.
This is a classic because the drama is monumental, but the characters are personal and real.
Ooh. This is a classic because it's good. Sorry.
Honestly, yeah, this is a classic because it's good.
This is our history. This is our legacy.
Hello, and welcome to This is a Classic, the Expand the Canon Theater Podcast. We're your hosts.
I'm Kalina, she, her, a curator for Expand the Canon.
And moi, I'm Gagarin, they, them, also a curator for Expand the Canon.
Expand the Canon is a program of Hedgepig Ensemble, a Brooklyn-based company that reimagines the classics, creating a legacy of storytelling with gender equity at its core.
Oh, yes. And today I am so excited, Kalina, because we are talking about Mahasweta Devi's Mother of 1084 from the Expanded Canon list available at expandthecanon.com. And if you were to go to that website, which you should, you would find this pitch.
If you're looking for a whirling political drama centering a mother's feminist awakening, consider this dreamlike exploration of familial ties and civic responsibility. Nearly 2 years after the killing of her son, Sujata continues to struggle with his involvement in the uprising that resulted in his death. She embarks on a journey to understand her son, and in doing so, comes to recognize her own oppression as a mother, wife, and woman. Reminiscent of Brecht's The Mother, this powerful and deeply human play examines grief, love, and the cost of revolution. It sounds like a great play.
It does sound like a great play, doesn't it?
Want to tell us more what it's about?
I'll tell you all about what it's about. So this play begins with Sujata, who is Bratti's mother, is awoken in the middle of the night by a phone call from a government official asking her to come to the police morgue to identify her son Bratti's body. Yeah, so we're starting at a 10.
Yeah.
So Sujata doesn't really understand what has happened when she gets this phone call. They hang up and she relays the information to her husband and her other son Jyoti because they were both asleep when she first got this call. And so then her husband and Jyoti rush into action, but not to go see what's up with their son or, make sure that Bratti's okay. Their first response is that they have to cover up the news while Sujata is going to go to the police to identify Bratti's body. It's to the point where her husband won't even let her take his car to go. She has to walk.
So when she goes to identify her son has been numbered corpse number 1084.
Yeah. So that is our opening scene. In our next scene, we fast forward 2 years later to the exact same day, which we find out is actually Bratti's birthday. So he died on his birthday, which is a big time bummer.
God.
Yeah.
Ugh.
But it is also the day of Sujata's daughter's engagement party to her fiance, Tony. Tuli and Tony. We love it.
Great couple names.
Destined to work out well. And Sujata's a little bit, understandably so, upset about the fact that Tuli has chosen Bratti's birthday and death day to have her engagement party on. But she says that she picked it because the Swami told her to, okay, whatever. There's also little key fact here. Sujata is drinking a cup of lime juice because she has chronic stomach pain. So anyway, Sujata and Tuli get into an argument over how Sujata is mad about how everyone else in the family talks about Bratti as if he's a criminal all the time, whereas Tuli's like, it's been 2 years, you have to let this go. But
Wait. Question. Do we know what happened, why Bratti was killed yet at this point?
Okay, so the thing is that the entire family is aware of why he was killed. Sujata herself does not know the truth of Bratti's involvement with some revolutionary kind of characters. But that's why her husband and her son Jyoti's initial reaction when they find out about his death is to cover it up as fast as possible.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So Sujata goes to visit this kid Somu's mother, and Somu was one of the other boys who was friends with Bharati and was with him when he was shot. So Sujata reveals to Somu that it was Andaninya who sold out the other boys to the police to get them executed. But then we have one of our first flashback moments. This is very much like a play that exists in memory and in a loose relationship to time. So this flashback is in Sujata's memory. She is with Bharati. It's 2 years ago. It's his birthday, and they're playing a little board game when Bharati gets a phone call from one of the other revolutionaries warning him about Ananya's betrayal and the whereabouts of the other revolutionaries. Bharati asks his mother for a little money, telling her that he just has to go out for a little bit and promise her that he's in no danger before leaving, whereas he's going to warn Somu and the others, and then they're all going to get killed.
Yikes.
Yeah, it's a big yikes. So Sujata tells Somu's mother all about this, and then we go into another flashback that is Somu's mother's memory of that night when Bharati and all the boys were executed. It's another very intense scene where Bharati and all the boys are in Somu's mother's house, and there is an angry civilian mob outside who is demanding that the boys give themselves up for being revolutionaries and that the mob will essentially kill them. The mob is also threatening to burn down Somu's house with everyone inside if the boys don't come out. So it's a tense situation. So Somu's father runs off to go and get the police to try to get them to help and defuse the situation. And he does end up finding the police, but they basically refuse to do anything. And while he is still out trying to find help, Bratti and the boys just decide to give themselves up because that will save everyone involved. And Somu's father dies of shock.
Oh my god, so many blows to these families.
Yeah. Somu's mother really goes through it this evening, and she also tells as much to Sujata because after she's done telling her this story of the night, Sujata tries to comfort Somu's mother, but Somu's mother is basically like, listen, you can't come around the house anymore because my neighbors are threatening me and my daughter for continuing to be involved with you because of your son's connection to the revolutionary activity. And Somu's mother they don't have any money anyway to begin with, so they really can't they can't take any further consequences.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yes, which Sujata doesn't really grasp, but Somu's
Right.
mother says that you wouldn't get this because you have money.
Right. Big theme.
Big theme. So Sujata leaves Somu's mother to go visit Nandini, who was Prati's partner and a fellow revolutionary. She talks to Sujata about Andinya's betrayal and how she feels they all should have seen it coming because the police and the government offered him money, power, and stability in return for his betrayal. And then this leads to Nandini and Sujata having a deeper conversation on betrayal as an ideal. And then Nandini reveals that it was her who called Bharati to tell him about Andinya selling everybody out, assuming that he was just going to call Somu or pass along the information in some other kind of not connected way. And shortly after, she tells him that she was arrested by the police. And then we have another flashback.
Love it.
This one is Nandini's recollection of being tortured to give up information about the other revolutionaries. It's pretty intense, and she refuses to give anything up about them. But basically, it's when the government reveals that they know everything about what's been going on in the revolutionary group because of Andinya, and that they're gonna send everyone to jail and kill anyone else who resists.
Oh my god, a very bleak moment. I feel like when I was reading it, I was like, how is this play going to dig itself back out of this desolation of all of the things that are revealed about the revolution?
Yeah. We come back to the present, and Sujata tries to make Nadini feel better now,
Mm.
which Nadini's like, okay, you're not going to make me feel better about this because as a result of her torture, she's mostly blind.
Ugh.
And in the scene, she's like wearing these big sunglasses when she's talking to Sujata. When this moment happens, she takes the sunglasses off, and Sujata sees that not only is Nadini mostly blind as a result to all these burns that have been put on her face, but now she's like permanently disfigured by this torture. And Nadini is like, there's nothing left for me now but the revolution. And she was like, you, Sujata, are going to be able to go back to your parties and your festivals and your normal life, but I'm never going to have that because of what I have experienced. Which is ironic because Sujata actually has to leave hanging out with Nadini pretty early because she has to get to Tuli's engagement party.
Damn, what a very poignant and pointed moment.
Yeah, right. So at the party, Sujata's family, there's a little bit of tension amongst the fam.
I wonder why.
Yes, two of her sons, Bini and Jyoti, get in an argument with Diman, who is a poet, because Diman has been writing a lot of poems about the death of the revolutionaries and has been selling all of these poems to like rich people and has been getting a lot of attention from the upper class for his art about all these noble revolutionaries and how they've died. And so Sujata is trying to hold it together, but she's kind of reeling from the events of this day, which for her are pretty crazy because it's like she got all of this information about what her son has been doing pretty much in the last 24 hours.
Oh my god.
Yes. And it gets, icing on the cake is this dude, Saroj Pal, shows up. And Saroj Pal is the deputy commissioner who raided Sujata's home after Brati's death and basically messed everything up and refused to let her take Brati's body, and is kind of the head guy for killing and hunting down all the revolutionaries. So he's at her party.
Oh my god. And on top of all that, like, this is the anniversary of her son's death. So there's all that emotional turmoil wrapped up in it all.
Yeah. And you know what? He shows up because he's a friend of Tony's, which,
Oh, Tony.
like, it really also goes to show, like, how Sujata's, like, level of involvement in class, like, closely ties her to these very oppressive figures. Basically, he sees Sujata and he feels really uncomfortable, and so then he just immediately leaves.
Good. Way to read the room.
Honestly,
Sorry.
like, yeah, like, get the fuck out. I wouldn't want you around anyway. But the two of them seeing each other causes Sujata to kind of have this break with reality, and in a way that is also like a big epiphany for her, like of how unbelievably cruel and insane it is that herself and everyone else in her family have just kept on going despite this epic disaster and all the other disasters and cruelties that will follow. And the intensity of this actually causes her to break the fourth wall and begin to charge the audience with standing up to do something. And she has this big monologue, and then she immediately collapses because her appendix has burst. Remember the lime juice, the chronic stomach pain? We come
Wow.
full circle.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And all in 24 hours.
All in 24 hours. So yeah, so that's the plot of this play. I think it packs such a strong punch.
Legacy.
To give a little bit more context on the plot and the story of this play, Mahasweta Devi, as a writer, she felt it was really important to document your own time in history. So the events of this play and the revolutionaries that we keep mentioning is specifically referencing the Naxalite movement of the 60s and the 70s in India. So the Naxalites are actually a group of Maoist communists which is slightly different than your run-of-the-mill communist.
Right. A very specific branch of it.
Yes, very, very specific, pulling their influence from Mao Zedong in China, who would have recently risen to power. Basically, the idea of Maoist communism is it's centered around continuous collective action from the lower classes that causes a steady overhaul of revolution rather than a Marxist-Leninism lens, which is more about redistribution of like property. Maoism is far more active. Is the term Naxalite itself is actually derived from the town of Naxalbari, which is in the far northern west Bengal state in northwestern India, which was a center for a tribal peasant uprising against local landlords in 1967, where the peasants began basically just seizing farmland from the landlords, which at the time were called jotadars. This was an occupation that began in March and it lasted until July, which is pretty intense considering that all of the Naxalites and peasants are basically armed with like bows and arrows.
Right.
Yeah.
That's very impressive. A very long time to occupy land.
Yeah. I wish I had more specific details to give us, but a lot of the information that is available about this online is like very clearly written with a certain perspective in mind.
That does happen sometimes.
Yes. So that's sort of like the short and the long of it. And what I think is important to know for us is that especially that these group of Naxalites was entirely like a lower class, like Dalit and untouchable caste kind of movement. So to get into the themes, Brati, being someone who is upper class, has money, coming from a wealthy family, to be not just working with these kinds of people, but seemingly having a position of leadership is a pretty big deal.
Right, right. And there's also that moment, I think that like when his partner Nandini sort of charges Sujata with her class and caste and sort of the fact that Sujata gets to go and just like enjoy an engagement party also feels very tied to like class and privilege and the capacity to just sort of like look away.
Mm-hmm. I think that's actually like a huge aspect of this is the capacity to look away and the capacity to not know, and how that is something that is afforded to so many people and then not afforded to so many others.
I find it really interesting that this play takes place 2 years after her son died, after Brati died. I think I'm like, there's grief and there's grieving, and sometimes it just takes a while to be ready to know what happened. But I also think that there's something, I think it's very intentional on the part of Mahasweta Devi to choose for her main character to go on this journey so long after sort of the event happened. You know what I mean?
Yes, no, I totally know what you mean. And I think that's also in line with like a big part of this awakening for Sujata is that she's like, how could I not have known that this is what was going on?
Yeah.
Like, how did I just have no idea? And I don't remember who says it, but one of the characters is specifically like, well, upper class families don't have to worry about their kids. And it's like specifically a comment because it's like Somu's mother is like knew Brati and didn't just know him, but knew all of the revolutionary boys very well and very intimately. And that's part of the reason why Sujata goes to her is that she's like, I feel like you knew all these boys so well. And she's like, yeah, because they were at my house all the time and because I was involved with my family, because they all need to rely on each other and like be an active community and in support with each other a lot more.
Fascinating. What I also love about is that I think like Devi really shows how class impacts, to your point about sort of like communication also being actually like a class thing. Upper class families don't have to be as responsible or like don't have to keep as close an eye on their children. She does a really lovely way of like highlighting all of the different dimensions that class impacts us. It's like not just about the money. It's not just about sort of like the wealth, but also about all of these other different like lifestyles that have to shift, like the communication piece that you talked about. I think it's articulated very well and very subtly.
Incredibly subtly, because I will say that like when I first read this play, that like the class aspect wasn't something that jumped out at me as like loudly as it has in this rereading.
Mhm.
And I'm like kind of surprised I didn't catch it earlier, because it is like such an integral part, because it also like is a comment on like motherhood, and like because
Mhm.
Sujata's also like, does that mean that I was a bad mom because I had no
Mm.
idea what was going on? And nobody says to her, you're a bad mom because you didn't know this, but people are like, you didn't know this because you, as a like rich upper class woman, haven't felt like you have to know about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's something that we see all the time today, and like you hear about it a lot today. And I mean, like, families with money
Yeah.
can afford to like pay for a nanny. And actually, oh my god, I totally forgot about this. During Sujata's flashback with Brati, she talks about how she has to give, even though it's Brati's birthday, she's like, well, I have to give a gift to Hem, who is their housekeeper. And
Oh.
Brati's like, why do you have to give her a gift? And she's like, well, she basically raised you.
Whoa. Wow. This play has so much packed into it. I'm just like, I feel like every time I reread it, there's just some new line that like stands out to me and like makes me think for so long. Like this whole like, I mean, obviously it is a play called Mother of 1084, and so motherhood is presumably going to be a big theme. But I think
Mhm.
there's so many dimensions to it that get explored.
Like her radicalization, especially in this final scene, it gives me very much like rebirth kind of vibes, because she has like such an intensive awakening over the course of this play.
I think what I love about that last scene is that throughout this play, she's been gathering all this information, but I think that last moment is like a way for her to like fully and truly process it. And I think that this play just like does a very good job of differentiating between like you can know things in your brain, but to like truly know it sort of in your heart is a different matter.
Oh yeah.
And so I feel like we get to watch her learn things in her brain for the first like 2/3 of the play. And then that last scene is her like it literally enters her body in an interesting way. Like she,
Mm.
I mean, say what you want about like she's been having a stomach ache the whole time, but I think the like stomach ache to appendix burst is also like a really apt and beautiful metaphor of like something has been wrong this whole time and she can feel it.
Mhm.
And at the end, she's like, this has become a problem or a thing that I cannot ignore. Like she's gonna have to address that burst appendix. Like I guess they like remove it or something. Again, not a doctor, but like I think that there's something really real, both like metaphorically but also like physically, about like what is it to like know that something is wrong, so
Yes.
deeply wrong that it becomes a part of your body. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, Kalina, nail head, you've knocked it. Well, because like that's kind of the thing that I'm sort of gestating on with this, is like the radicalization of like the youth. And I think
Mm,
especially this relationship of like radical knowledge and holding that, and like holding that in your mind versus holding that in your body. Because we can even trace this back like to Nandini too. Like her body
yeah.
is mutilated and now disabled by
Right.
as a result of her holding this radical knowledge and holding these beliefs. She's been doing this for a long time, so it's like she's able
Yeah.
to like withstand and take on this physical brunt with her
Yeah.
ideals and like pay for them in that way. And I think it's interesting to see that like Sujata is able to like hold them quietly in the form of a stomach ache for a
Mm,
long way, but it all reaches a point of acuteness and a lucidity for her that she must burst because she can't hold it inside of her anymore.
yeah. Yeah.
Because it's so much easier, especially when you are someone who is already existing in a place of comfort, to
Mm,
take on ideals that extend your comfort and continue to withhold you, or protect you, perhaps is maybe a better word, from having to actually engage with anything that is going on in the world that is negative, or that like you are also perhaps directly contributing to. um
yeah.
yeah, there's so much. I mean, I don't know how political we're allowed to get on this podcast, but I, because especially like it makes me think about like radicalization of the youth versus radicalization of older folks and how that
Yeah.
goes down. Because it's interesting that we never find out how Bratti got involved with this group, but
Right.
we just know that like he is, and that this is something that he feels he needs to keep a secret from his family, to the point where like his mom also doesn't even really know that like Nandini exists.
This also really reminds me of sort of like the danger of revolution.
Mm.
And like that true radicalization can be very dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
which is not to say that people shouldn't engage with it, obviously, but it is so clear how much danger these revolutionaries are in. I mean, like many of them were killed. I think it's fascinating to me that when the father of Bratti found out that he was killed by the police for this reason, like his instinct was to cover it up and like not even be allowed to like grieve his own son, but like he's like more worried about the backlash that his family will experience because of like social pressures. And I'm interested in, or I'm like intrigued by sort of that like intense danger that being a revolutionary can confer on like the people around you as well as yourself.
Yeah, which I think is actually a really really good point, Kalina. Because what I was just thinking about when you were talking about the danger of revolution is it well depicted in Bratti's class level that he, instead of calling Somu and the other guys to tell them that Andinya had betrayed them, that he goes to them directly. Especially because like Somu lives in they call it repeatedly a colony in the play. He lives in a
Mm,
colony where a lot of these killings are happening, and where like it is really really dangerous for someone, especially someone like Bratti who isn't from the neighborhood, to go there.
mm,
I think you could even make the argument that Bratti, as like the rich kid who got involved with all these radicals and revolutionaries, probably didn't really think anything bad would happen to him either.
right. Right. It's like a blind spot to have if you've like grown up without sort of like ever ongoing vigilance in your life.
Yeah, 100%. And that's also like, I mean, that's something that comes up all the time now at protests. You cannot go to a protest anymore and not be prepared to be arrested by the
Mm,
police, because any true revolutionary act is going to come with this kind of a cost and with this kind of intensity and level of danger to
yeah.
yourself and to the people around you. A lot of people don't go to protests because they can't afford to miss work that day if they get arrested and like they have a family that's depending on them.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is another like class related like revolution thing.
Yeah. It all just keeps coming back around.
It all comes back.
History.
Well, I'm curious, Gigs, what this playwright was like. What was her life like? How did she birth this beautiful play?
Oh, yes. So Mahasweta Devi was born in 1926, and she seemed destined for a writing career from the start. Her mother was a novelist, and her father was a social activist. So, from a young age, Devi was mired in service and literary arts. So, at the age of 21, she married the playwright Bijan Bhattacharya, and they had a son, and they lived in Kolkata. They lived in poverty for the first early years of their marriage, and Devi had to work several jobs in order to supplement her husband's income.
I love knowing that in like any age and country, being a playwright is still not a lucrative career. Sorry, don't know if I can say that. Cut that if I can't.
Had to keep doing what you can to support, and also that she's supporting her husband on that one. You know what?
Yeah,
Good for you, girl. I think
breadwinner.
breadwinner. Mahasweta gives me big like. I would never say girl boss because she's a badass. Like, she seems like a boss bitch. I would not want to fuck with her.
Yeah,
You don't want to
truly.
smoke. So she wrote her first novel when she was 30, which is only 9 years after she got married. So, she didn't wait around too long before getting to kicking on her own stuff. Um, so the book, The Queen of Jhansi, was a fictionalized account of the queen who dressed as a man to fight against the British in the Indian Rebellion of 1857. Um, she did a lot of research for this by traveling across northern India and interviewing villagers and listening to the stories about this queen that were passed down through generations.
Wow, I can definitely see sort of where the like documenting of history and like historical moments comes from.
Yes, which I thought was really interesting because this was in an interview where she mentioned that idea, feeling like as a writer, it's my job to document the happenings of my time, was that she had felt like nothing had really happened. So she started chronicling older events, and then
Mm.
all the Naxalite uprising started. And she was like, okay, so this is the thing that's happening right now. So now I'm going to write about
Right.
this. Um,
Wow.
which so she originally wrote The Mother of 1084 as a novel, and then she dramatized it in 1972, 73-ish, even though the novel itself wasn't published until 74. Her dramatization, though, never reached the stage,
Ooh.
with theaters instead opting to perform a more sanitized version that tempers the violence the rebels encountered from the state in the play. So anyway, so she wrote over 100 plus novels and short stories in her lifetime, and many of them were centered around this idea of documenting the lives of tribal communities, rebels and revolutionaries, sex workers, nomads, and the lower classes.
Sorry, I just want to highlight 100 plus novels and short stories. That
Yes,
is very impressive.
that is like such a wealth of material to create over the course of a lifetime. Where also it's like, she had a kid and she had a husband who
She
knows.
was like working another job and traveling, it sounds like.
Yeah, and like really committed to making sure that this was a craft, that it was serious. And it says that also like she was embedding herself in these communities when she went there to go and interview these people to get recon for these stories that she was writing. She was spending a lot of time out on the field to be sure that she was documenting something real, which I think is also to like speak to this play, is that this play feels very real. And
Mm.
like I especially feel like even though Sujata is very much like um an everyman kind of a mother, like everyone else in the play and a lot of the other scenes in the play feel hyper realistic to me.
Mm.
The play itself has this kind of like
Yeah.
dreamlike quality that is certainly influenced by like the sound and stage design, which Mahasweta describes in detail in the script. But
And the like memory play aspect of it. I think the time jumps like add to the dreamlike nature.
definitely, definitely. But I think all of those components, even though in theory they are taking the piece to a place of abstraction, I feel like because the emotions and the like mental revelation is so big and so like monumental, that having these more kind of like feelings of abstraction put in there help to ground us in what that sensation of that giant revelation is like, which
Mm.
is why it
Yeah.
feels so real.
Yeah.
Because you can only imagine how many kind of similar revelations she must have had in her life, going to all these
Mm.
different communities and speaking to people of so many different walks and experiences.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So we're going to run this out with a fun little quote, that Mahasweta was known for her unflinchingly honest tongue and dark humor and idealism about the world. A friend, Devi, wrote of her, "It was impossible to predict when, in the middle of the most polite conversation with the person she had not previously met, she would curtly dismiss civility and tell the person that he was a fraud."
That's just so iconic. Like with
Right?
people she doesn't know. She's just like, yeah, you are a fraud. Goodbye. Ugh.
I have a feeling she was an earth sign.
Mm. Grounded. Yeah, that
She
feels right. That feels right.
she lived to the ripe old age of 90 in 2016, which honestly, good for you, girl. I don't know if you'd want to see what it's like right now.
Yeah, I don't know, but I'm glad she had such a long, fulfilling life and that we got 100 plus novels and short stories out of it.
Truly. Mahasweta Book Club.
And now, a monologue from Mother of 1084, a selection of Nandinis performed by Shubhra Prakash.
failings, mistakes, deviations. I still wonder how we could afford not to know that with all that has happened since 1947, all human loyalties had dissolved by 1970. I wonder how we could be unaware that they could betray us to kill us. I wonder how we could be shocked whenever we heard that behind an assassination there was someone closely related to the victim. A father, a brother, a relation, a friend, or an acquaintance. People think that we hate whatever exists. But someday there will be people who'd say that behind all our apparent hatred lay a craving to love and to revere. You wouldn't understand. Now, when we look back, it all seems to have been a betrayal. Betrayal was rampant, but we hadn't been taught to be suspicious. When we began to suspect and could analyze our past experiences, only then could we become more confident of ourselves. But we felt the end of an era in those days. We thought we were bringing in a new era. I and Brati walked from College Street to Bhawanipur day in and day out, talking, just talking. Those days, there was a sheer delight in talking, in looking upon the streets and processions, in people, in the red roses at the street crossing, in the neon lamps, in watching, in the Hindi songs on the radio. We could burst with delight. I'm not the same person anymore. An era has gone by. What I'd been in those days is dead forever.
Dum, dum. Thank you for joining us for this episode of This is a Classic, the Expand the Canon podcast. Learn more at expandthecanon.com.
If you believe in the importance of expanding the canon, and who doesn't, please give us a 5-star review and subscribe to this podcast.
And then hit the share button, dude, and forward it along to a friend, colleague, professor, lover, your mother, any of the above.
Options are endless. For info on what's up next, you can follow us on Instagram,
At Hedgepig Ensemble Theater.
Facebook,
/ Hedgepig Ensemble Theater.
or you can join our mailing list, subscribe to our list, and download many of these scripts at expandthecanon.com.
You can also support this effort by donating at the link in the comments below. Again, I am Gagarin.
And I am Kalina.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Give your mom a kiss from me.
I love that.